Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today on a very special episode of Recruit Military Live. I am your co-host, Gabby Petticrew, along with my amazing co-host, Raul Torres. How's it going this morning, Raul?
Couldn't feel any better.
Right? It is hump day, halfway through the week, you guys. And given the time of year, today we are going to be discussing something extra spooky. That's right, you guys. We are going to be talking about some feelings, y'all. For some of y'all, that could be a little spooky and hard to digest. We will be hitting on the stress of transitioning from the military and how to best manage it. Today's guest is a life coach and stressalist who coaches, trains, and speaks on how to reset a person's fight, flight, or freeze and prevent burnout. Prior to coaching, she worked for over 15 years in mental health and crisis management until she herself got stuck in fight, flight, or freeze. Her 15 years of experience with mental health trauma and crisis intervention and recovery has led her to become a leading expert in nervous system dysregulation while creating and leading programs to serve and enhance the quality of life amongst military personnel, first responders, and leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Trisha Houghton. Good morning, Trisha.
Good morning, Trisha.
Good morning, Gabby. Good morning, Raul, and everybody else. Awesome to be here.
We're very excited to have you, especially on this topic. You know, as we discussed before, we have primarily focused on assisting the military community in bridging the gap between the civilian sector and military sector when it comes to their careers and making sure they have the smoothest transition of careers. And this is honestly, since I've been here, one of the first times that we have ventured into the internal side, the mental side of that transition. So having you here, especially with me being such a feelings person, I'm very excited to have you here because it is definitely a very exciting topic, and important topic, honestly, for our military community.
Absolutely. And it's often overlooked. It's one of the biggest things that reason I'm here, as I think I've told you both. I never planned on the transition space, but it worked out perfectly. It was working out perfectly. And you guys just stole my heart because, very few people get to finish a whole career and go, I might have half or 3/4 of my life left, depending on your length of time. Like, what do I want to do? And what lights me up is helping people kind of, find their next thing or recover from the thing. And so that they can enjoy their full life with their family, with friends, and live and not just survive. So I love the topic, obviously. And so I'm glad to be here for sure. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And as soon as I got, me and Gabby got your bio, immediately read through it, and I got flashbacks instantaneously to my transition a year, what is it now, 2 years now, January of 2021. And I immediately thought of you can ask my wife, I'm not a touchy-feely person whatsoever, but man, that transition period was probably the most anxious I've been in a super long time. Just thinking the biggest thing on my mind was where we're going to live, where we're going to work. And I woke up with that feeling every single morning for weeks, months before transition. And I went to bed thinking about, having that weight on my shoulders. And man, I'm sure there were resources out there that I probably on my end didn't reach out to, but I'm really glad to hear this is your space, and you're really good at it. So we'd love to hear more about what it is you do exactly, and how you help folks in the transition space.
So I'll take this it's a two-part answer, so hang in there with me. So first thing I do specifically for transitioning service members is I have a group that I started called Vetted. We started about almost this time last year, so a little under a year. And it came about because, number one, I've been a group facilitator for my whole career and absolutely love and suggest that if anybody says to me, gosh, Trisha, should I do like one-to-one or should I go into a group support space? And I'll say both, because as great as myself or you guys are one-to-one, or anybody, you cannot give somebody the experience of having them hear from their peers the thing they've been worried is just like something they freak out about or worry about, or just feel honestly like isolated by. And then when someone else says it, that's a peer of theirs, it just changes their whole world in 2 seconds. So when I went to some of the bigger networking events and for transitioning service members that I was invited to, I just saw how career focused everything was. And I just said, well, gosh, number one, it's super overwhelming, right? And I felt that. Just so much information, so many tips. And it's like, you can't input all that at one time. And it's not that it's not good information, right? And it's needed information. However, one of the biggest I see issues in the transition space, or anybody, is just how do you do the journey, right? Like, how do you not get totally stressed out and then not become any good to yourself, your spouse, your kids, your dog, your whatever, even your life, because it can consume all of you for sure. So Vetted basically is a support group that comes together every Tuesday night from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's based of all transitional support members, transitioning service members. So each week we come, anybody's welcome that either has recently transitioned or who is in the process, and you get basically feedback from anybody and everybody who's there. So we have guys at all different parts of their transitions, from I'm a few months into the process to I'm 8 months in my civilian job. And I just allow them to have that space and share whatever their frustrations are, whatever their questions are. What do they want to know from their peers who are now, gone through this process and recently done so? Had a great session last night about kind of just, hey, there's no stupid questions. You don't know what you don't know. And I think that's one of the biggest things. Sounds simple, right? But like, we all hold ourselves, I think, to this pressure to know, but you don't. You've never been here before, or you haven't been here like this with, as Raul said, like the stressors of finding where to live and finding, a job that's going to put food on the table. Like, those are major things. So yeah, you get to come to the group, tell me what you need, ask anything from our core group, and, basically show up. And it's growing into a program is developing, so that January of 24 we'll start sharing what that would be, because it's more than just while you're transitioning. We're going to do an after the transition group called After the Uniform, so that those that are in Vetted, right, have somewhere else to go and still get support for their current stressors and worries or whatever it may be, because it really just manifests, right? So
yeah, definitely. And Raul, I just saw that we had a comment from one of our viewers, Dwayne Davis, who says that he's struggling with this right now. Is finding appropriate employment with his qualifications, even after he's translated his military experience. And I can tell you that this is something that resonates with everyone across the board. And I think what's kind of tricky about this situation is that regardless of how much time you spent in service, you're used to functioning and working under stress and, organized chaos. And so it becomes your norm for your nervous system. So when you get out of the military, whether, during your transition or, months, years after, you may still be functioning under that level of stress and not even, realizing it. It may be even more stressful. And you're no longer able, I guess, to recognize the signs and the effects of that stress and how it may be negatively affecting you, your family, if you happen to be married with kids or what have you. So to that point, Trisha, what would you say are some signs and, the negative effects of working under that stress?
Right. And this is part 2 of what I do. So I developed what's called the HACK program, which is a full nervous system reset program. So let's say Gabby comes to me, we set up an initial appointment, and I hear basically her life in every sense. So her relationships, her daily tasks, her goals, we create some, and seeing how she's specifically being affected and saying, okay, like, what are symptoms that, you struggle with? So some of the most common ones are, of course, my first question is always, how's your sleep? Because, oh goodness.
I feel like all the veterans and active duty members are like, what sleep?
Yeah, no, honestly, number one response, you guys, is, well, what sleep? It used to be mine too. That's why we're here. It's, what's your sleep like, right? Because sleep has to do with hormones and the timing of the hormonal release, right? So we have this internal clock, as we all know, and a rhythm. So it's circadian rhythm. When it's functioning well and it's healthy, you go to sleep naturally. You get into a sleep, you wake up semi-naturally, right? And that's how you function. And sleep is that bodily chance for your mind, your body to heal, to decompress. We need it for health. We need it for sanity. We need it relationally. I mean, sleep deprivation is awful. I know everybody knows, because all the sleep is whack, right? So that's always my first thing. Is I always ask people, number one, what's your problem with sleep, right? Because I usually get, what sleep? So is it falling asleep? Is it staying asleep? Or is it you wake up between 2 and 4 a.m. every day? Most people go, well, how do you know I wake up between 2 and 4? And I was like, because when you have a dysregulated nervous system, your cortisol releases naturally in everybody around that time. However, for a dysregulated nervous system, for a healthy nervous system, you get that release and it slowly increases your cortisol until, say, you wake up, whatever time that is. And that's what wakes you up. Dysregulated nervous system, it goes, oh, cortisol, shoot it out now. And you get as much, say if you wake up 6, 7 a.m., right there at 3 a.m. So, of course, you ping awake, right? And you're like, oh, my gosh, it's only 3? Or it's, some people 2:30, give or take, right? Between 2 and 4. So that's always my, okay, something's off. And I'll tell you, there's no way to be a human in 2023, especially post-COVID and the hustle culture we have, that you don't have some dysregulation issues. And that's not any fault of your own. The military context creates this issue to thrive, because your fight, flight, freeze is getting turned on and off like a light switch. Well, what happens if you turn and flicker on and off a light switch? Eventually what happens? The bulb goes, nope, can't
burns out.
Yep. So what do, right? Like, you either replace the bulb, which is, of course, usually, but if we're talking about ourselves, we can reach out to do other things. So some of the things I like to recommend are, everybody knows this one, right? But it's breathing. It is the most underrated thing in the world. So I always call them pregnancy breaths. It's also known as diaphragmatic breathing would be proper. However, I call it that so that you know how you're doing it correctly. So, most of us, if you've ever seen anybody hyperventilate, what's moving up and down their chest, right? And they're getting worse because this signals to your fight, flight, freeze that we're not okay and we need that part of our nervous system on and ready. But if they stop and they say, okay, do deep breaths, the reason people say that is because that switches your fight, flight, freeze to the parasympathetic calming system, so that when you do that, it makes it go to the calming system, right? So if you deep breathe and you push your belly out to look like you're pregnant, then you're doing those diaphragmatic breaths. Do 3 of those, and I guarantee you a couple things will happen. Number one, you should feel slightly different. It's not like night and day, but your shoulders kind of come down on breath 3 because you've literally forced that other system, the calming one, and you're saying, hey, we're okay. We don't need this right now. We're not in a crisis. We don't need to be at the top of our game. So like, let's chill out, right? So that's one of the things that's a great, easy starter. It can be done whether you're behind a desk, whether you're in the middle of a combat situation, though that's, I'm sure, very, very stressful in a different way. The other thing is hydration, right? Like we run on, let's face it, like energy drinks, caffeine, sugar, right? Like this is a huge indicator to get levels in our body off. If you're having a lot of sugar, your insulin's going to be awful. If your insulin's awful, you've got inflammation. If you've got inflammation, then you hurt more, right? And that affects your hormones production in every part of your body and your sleep, right? So there's so many interconnections in our daily life that these are lifestyle things we can adjust. So even if you do a little less caffeine, or maybe my personal thing, because I am a coffee addict, it is my problem and I know it. But to cut it off by a certain time, because what ends up happening, right, is usually anything post 3 p.m., it's going to then start to mess with your sleep capabilities. And since we all have a rough enough time with sleep, let's not make it harder and try to not have caffeine after 3. Because then your chances are you'll be better asleep. What happens, though, usually we are too tired. We feel like we need something. The kids need stuff. Your partner needs something. Everybody needs something. And so what do? We're like, oh, I just need something. We grab the thing, right? And I get it. But then you're shooting yourself in the foot even more so with sleep. And the reason why I harp on sleep hygiene is because it is a big piece to the reset. It's why one of the measures I know you're doing better is, hey, I actually got more than my usual sleep last night. And I'm like, okay, what did we do? So those are 2 things. Again, I know they're not massive, but my favorite one is called the 2-minute feel drill, right? So especially with all the noise in today's society, right? What you do is I get in the floor. That's just my spot, because you need to get somewhere that you're not in front of a screen or not tempted by something in your vision. So on the floor, usually, right, like you just a space that's not taking your attention. And I set my timer for 2 minutes. And the thing I love about this, and that I get a lot of great feedback on, is you're not meditating. You're not conjuring up like, be this, be that. No. And you're not doing any type of deep breathing even. You're just sitting there, and for 2 minutes, you're saying, okay, body, mind, right? Everything, feel whatever you need to feel in those 2 minutes. It's simply not blocking anything and not making yourself think of something, right? So a lot of people love meditation and Zen. If that's cool, cool. But I just want you to not do, because we are all doing so much that
all the
time, right? So it's like just the not doing allows your body an outlet, and it's super smart. So if you're giving it 2 minutes and you're not going to stop a feeling, which you might say, well, Trisha, I don't do that. Respectfully, you probably do, but you don't know it.
Exactly.
But what we do is when that 2 minutes, when the timer goes off, right, you get up, you go back to your day. A lot of people don't want to do things or get in their feels, so to speak, because they're like, look, I won't come out of it. That's why it's 2 minutes.
Yeah.
You're training your brain with an alarm, right? With the whole system that no. We don't just go into this pit and just swim in it and stay in it. We go back to work, or we go back to our day, or whatever that looks like.
Yeah, feeling your feelings is a big thing. I mean, I went through therapy myself after I transitioned from the military, and there were so many feelings that, because I thought they were unhealthy feelings, I wasn't addressing them. I was pushing them back. So yeah, definitely being able to sit with your feelings, go through the motions of it, recognize them, deal with it, address it, set a cap for that amount of time and then be like, okay, I felt it. I gave it attention.
Yeah.
Time to move on to the next thing. It took me a while to learn that, but it definitely is a lot better than just stuffing it all inside of, a wall locker and putting a combo lock and then never addressing it ever again.
Right.
Yeah. And a few things I just got to say, as soon as you said breathing and water, I immediately thought back to the corpsman's advice for every single person.
Change your socks and hydrate, right? You guys. Change your socks and hydrate.
And get some good sleep. And then 2, I wanted to go back to, I think it was Dwayne's comments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man, yes. The biggest struggle for me, Dwayne, was kind of getting away from thinking about it all. And that's kind of when I found, one, I was able to talk to my wife because I felt like it was kind of all on me. And then after a few weeks, I was like, okay, maybe I do need some help. That's where people like Trisha are able to come in, somebody to kind of talk to, like what you're going through, because it's not normal anxiety during transition, especially when you can't just stop thinking about it. But with that being said, Trisha, any specific programs out there that you may have, or like any other just further things that people that are in the transition can look to?
Yeah, for sure. I'll speak to kind of that real quick as far as what you felt, Raul, and I know it's what everybody else feels too. I hear that, honestly, you guys, like it's still, there's still such a stigma of sharing and your mental struggles or your stress struggles. It's honestly, I hate it. It's 2023. We all struggle, and we have way more similar struggles than we do different struggles. That if we'd all just kind of own it, it wouldn't be weird, and we wouldn't feel this, ooh, but I got to put on a brave face, right? And I got to endure it all on my own. No, you don't. And whether that's, in a group like Vetted or with you guys, right? Or going through a program that's for transitions, people are here. And the reason why I think, Raul, all the anxiety comes is you don't have the pace you were in. You took a major shift of pace from, again, I've worked with people that did 4 years all the way up to 35. So for the 35 years, people, oh my gosh, that is like so deeply in you. And it's your nervous system going, hey, we're not okay, because it's still in routine. We're one big muscle memory, right? So your body remembers what you need it to do and when you need it to do it. It takes a minute, especially with years of service and the more years of service, to go, oh, we don't need this much adrenaline, or we don't need this much cortisol. And with the other options, with the other issues, such as the sleeping issues or the anxiety, right? Like all that's kind of driving one thing and another. And the physical and the mental and everything is connected. So it's not just one or the other. But I do what's called a nervous system reset program called the HACK program. It was designed for as dysregulated as you would characteristically think of a soft veteran or a SEAL. I work with soft veterans and non-soft, don't have to be, but I actually partnered with a new nonprofit who will pay 65 to 70% of the cost for any soft or soft spouse to go through my program. It's an 8-week program. We do 2 sessions for the first 2 weeks, and then we move down to 1 session a week for the remainder. Then we do a 2-week follow-up and then a 3-month follow-up. So I want to know what's working, what's not. You basically get, again, that personalized plan catered to you. So on our first session, we break down everything in life. And I do mean everything, because it all interconnects. And we make a plan that you can work and then forever filter through from this point forward. We're going to change some habits. Some of it's lifestyle. Some of it's our tips and techniques using kind of psychology and neuroplasticity. And I won't get into the depths of it, but of how to keep your system regulated. And so that when you get all sorts of news, because stress is not going anywhere, you guys, like, unfortunately it's not, right? So what can we do to help your body, your mind weather that storm that we know isn't leaving us, unfortunately? Yeah. And then we work that together, right? I'm a coach. I'm not better. I'm not worse. I always joke that I get to kind of kick butt as a coach a bit, which can be fun if people are open to that. But so there's that program, and then I do a new program that I'm hopeful to go to train how leaders can identify nervous system dysregulation. Programs called Regulating. It's not been posted yet, so but it's a sneak peek, and it trains leaders what this issue is, because the biggest thing we have is a lack of awareness and education that your nervous system can get stuck in fight flight. If you don't know it can get stuck, here's what ends up happening most of the time. One day it gets worse and it gets worse. It's just not going to get better, you guys. It's not. Mm-hmm. And then something happens and it just says you're not listening loud enough. For me, it was my body stopped controlling if I was awake or asleep. Like, literally, it seemed like it was overnight. It was not overnight. And again, I didn't know this, right? You don't know what you don't know. So I educate about this issue, and then I train leaders how to recognize it in lower enlisted, how to kind of look out for some warning signs and some things like that, and also share how basically military culture built you into being this tune it out person.
Yeah.
And that's necessary while you're in the military, but the rest of your life and the quality is going to depend on your ability to tune in. Mm-hmm. And that's the reality, right? You can't just go and go and go and beat yourself and not sleep and be well for yourself, for your family. Like, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes us so admirable and resilient in the civilian workplace, right? Is because we've spent years enduring the embrace the suck type of mentality. And so we've gotten used to, again, working under that type of stress. So with that, what would you say are some ways to spot, like what factors do you look out for, not only in yourself, but in others, because these are amazing programs. But again, if you don't even know that you're undergoing these stress factors and it's affecting you in ABC ways, or your friends and family, others in the military community, how would you even know to reference them to these programs? So what would you say are some signs to spot, specifically if you're enduring this type of stress?
Right. So I call them all the AIDs. If you live in agitated, irritated, just frustrated, and then okay, those are kind of your feelings you live in. I'm either agitated, frustrated, irritated, and then like sometimes okay. That is not right. Like, that's not a spectrum of a healthy, functional system. It's a survival system, and that's why you have those limited emotions. And sometimes it's okay, but most of the time it's an aided. What I call, I had to rename it. So exhaustion didn't work for me, because I kid you not, you could have told me, Trisha, you can sleep for a year, right? And like, that's all you got to do for the next year. And I would have already been tired. And I know this sounds ridiculous, because I would have thought that will never be enough. So I said, no more exhaustion. That doesn't describe it enough. It's bone tired. And for those that hear that word, if you know it, it's like a night's sleep's not going to help it. 10 nights sleep's not going to help it. It is so deeply felt. It's in my bones. If that is how you feel, I can tell you that this is an issue. And you can wait till you crash, because it will eventually happen in some way. It might not be a physical, right, like what I had happen, but in some type of way you will. Another one is memory. If you've got kind of like foggy brain, or you just are like always and again, this is tricky, right? Because a lot of these symptoms overlap with other issues. And you might say, well, gosh, I just thought that was, most people think it's normal, right? Well, we've normalized this, right? But it's actually not, right? Like in theory, we're healthy. We get to go to sleep. We get to have some energy and do stuff. And again, I'm not talking about I'm exhausted for every once in a while, right? This is an ongoing chronic thing that you can't get ahead of. And if you've been a military member, I can guarantee you, again, to a certain degree, that you had dysregulation, just because, especially post 2020, we all do, because trauma, right? And collective trauma into varying degrees.
Mm-hmm. Well, I 1000% agree with that. As you're talking and, bouting off every single one of these symptoms, I'm like, check, I have that, check, no natural energy. So the relatability is so strong with me, and I'm sure it's resonating with our military community and our viewers as well. I know you mentioned the programs that are either up and coming or that you're currently running right now. Is there anything else that you have for our military community out there right now when it comes to this very important topic?
Right. Yes. And so the new program, I'll mention one more, is Stress Ed. I'm about to start it. I know we have a flyer we'll be happy to put up. It's an 8-week group. It's not a reset group, but you're going to get those uncommon facts and discussions about stress and how it affects mind, body, relationships, literally every aspect of your life. And so it's something that's kind of, in a whole cycle, right? So you get other people that support you. It'll be a group of about 8 to 10 to ensure you still get kind of some individual time and you're not, saving it up. So there's that. I also have a retreat coming up. So if you are in the Tennessee area, in Butler, Tennessee, from actually Veterans Day weekend, November 10 to 12, I will be there. We will be doing groups. A group a day. 1's on self-identification, 2's on importance of connection, and 3's on that self-care piece, because we all need to take care of ourselves. So if you were interested in any of that, all of it, I lastly have a civilian culture position that's a 4-week group, because a lot of my coaches, as I call them, would go into their skill bridge or their internship and get really shocked by civilian culture. And I kept hearing nobody cares. I didn't know there was not a program between I've got a skill bridge or an internship, or maybe even day one of your job, and something that can tell you what to expect. So here's a small, 4-week, very focused group beginning November 9th for an hour a week. And we go through what military culture built you into, what culture is in the workplace, how to create your family culture, because they're changing too. Their roles are different. So how to come under one roof and say, what do we want our culture to be like here? And then lastly, I give you a ton of real life scenarios of experience I've had, seen, heard that are real life, happened in the civilian work culture. And you get to share what to do about it, or your questions, or anything like that. So those are just a few. I offer a whole range of stuff. And again, I'm very passionate about this topic because it's not being talked about. And so if you don't know that this is an option, you begin the dark hole of thinking this is just you and you can't hack life. And that it's so not true. It's not just you. There's a deeper issue. And I'd love to chat for anybody who would want to. So please don't hesitate to reach out. My info's on there. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. Stressalist.com also exists. And so.
And thank you for mentioning that you're not alone, because just like Sean here mentioned, he always has dreams about being back on active duty, getting ready for meetings. And I think every single one of us I just saw Raul smile. I did the same thing when I saw his comment. We've all had those dreams where we're back behind a desk or back in the field, back doing something where it's just like when you wake up here, like, oh no, that stress builds up in all kinds of crazy ways in your dreams at times too. I think what's great about your programs and, many programs is that whether you're doing one-on-one coaching or getting in a group setting, you're realizing that you are not alone, that all these things that you feel are so stressful and just only you are experiencing, there's so many others who are going through the exact same things, the exact same worries and troubles and weight on their shoulders. And just in itself, knowing that you are not alone and hearing those real world experiences that others are going through that are so similar to yours just gives you that breath of fresh air and that just release that you're like, okay, well, it's not just me. I'm not going crazy over here on myself dealing with all of this. So I love that you said that you're not alone. It's okay to not be okay all of the time, because you can't be running at 100% all the time, 24/7, 365. So thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Trisha, I mean, just hearing it, I'm sure the listeners just knowing, because I don't think I've heard this conversation. Like, I've never tuned in to somebody having this conversation. So I'm sure it's probably changing a few people's, not minds, but just how they feel about maybe a situation they're currently going through. So we appreciate you bringing light to it.
Oh, I'm happy to do it. And it's why I offer so many groups, is to just show on a greater magnitude. Here's proof, right? Like, you're seeing it, everybody's seeing it. It's as common. It's not uncommon, and it's not just you.
Mm-hmm.
And we all need help, honestly. Like, there's not a single person that's stress-free. Stress just looks different on everybody, but the system impacts are there. So I want to have more conversations about it. Thank you guys for having me, because you're right. I don't even see these happening, which is a further red flag. So I appreciate it very much. And anybody that wants to connect, please do so. I'm happy to have a chat anytime. And thank you, Gabby and Raul.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today,
You're
Trisha.
welcome.
We loved having you on.
Awesome.
All right. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for today's episode of Recruit Military Live. And we will see you next time. Have a great week.
See ya.
Bye, guys.